Hi, my name is Shannon Bailey, and today I'm going to be talking to you about constitutional rights within disaster. For a little overview on what we're going to be talking about today, I'm going to start off with the applicable amendments in disaster policies and which ones the government tends to violate after a disaster. From there, I'm going to move on to just a few violations of these rights that are main events that happened in history. And to close up today, I'm going to talk about disaster policy rights organizations and who we can see helping those who have had their rights violated after a major disaster. The First Amendment we are covering today is Amendment 1, and this is the freedom of speech, press, religion, petition, and assembly. And we see this amendment violated after many disasters in that the government tends to regulate which media people are releasing information and where the news is getting to, as they don't want it to be dispersed for negative public perception. From here, we move on to Amendment 2, which we know is the right to bear arms. In today's times, this is very controversial as it can be seen as a very violent amendment. And in many natural disaster or other disaster cases, this amendment can be violated as the government tends to take away the right to bear arms to reduce any backlash of violence after a storm or other disaster has hit. The next important amendment to cover is Amendment 5, and this is the right to due process of law and access to a grand jury. In addition to those, it's also the compensation and taking private property for public use. This means that whenever the government uses your private property, such as it did during past war times, they must compensate you in return. The next amendment is Amendment 10, and this is an important one we have learned in class as it follows the bottom-up implementation pattern. In this amendment, the right of states is empowered, and this can limit federal power. During the bottom-up implementation pattern, we know that the states must request federal relief in order for them to react, and this amendment protects that. The last amendment is Amendment 14, and that is the right to equal protection. This is crucial to everyone of different race, genders, and religions, as they all deserve and are by law required equal relief after a disaster. Some important violations of these constitutional rights that have happened during history are in Hurricane Katrina, in which the right to bear arms was revoked. The government was hoping that this would reduce any violent actions after, but in return, the lack of government relief really just increased the violence. Another important part in history was the Civil War, in which Amendment 5 was violated. As I spoke on before, the government must provide compensation whenever taking private property, and Abraham Lincoln did not do so. Also, during the Civil War, Abraham Lincoln changed around martial law, in which you can break habeas corpus under martial law. This is now stated in Article 1, Section 9. After these disasters hit, it is important to note that there are disaster policy rights organizations built around helping those who have had their constitutional rights violated. First is the American Bar Association, which has a special committee dedicated to preparedness in lawyers' offices around the disaster-stricken area. These committees will get the people who have had their rights violated the justice they deserve. In addition to the ABA, there's also the Interagency Standing Committee, which has built a guideline book around human rights in natural disasters. This will help the general public act as humanitarians after a disaster and helping those around them. They even include special areas dedicated to children, women, and those with physical disabilities who are understood to need more attention than others. Also, whenever talking about constitutional rights within public disasters, it's important to bring about the discussion on if the government's violation of these rights in certain disasters really goes too far. While I believe that many of them do go far, you can see somewhat of where they're going whenever trying to take away things such as the right to bear arms. They're more focused on reducing violence in the milling process and also reducing the negative public perception instead of getting these people the help that they need. Thank you for your time today, and I hope you learned a little bit about constitutional rights within disasters and how to help those around you after a disaster and get the justice that they deserve whenever the government violates their constitutional rights.